When a ragged child's desperate warning pierces the morning air at a humble street-side eatery, President Ibrahim Traoré's simple meal becomes the catalyst for a discovery that will shake an entire nation. What this barefoot boy knows will save lives and change everything. The morning light cast a golden glow across Ouagadougou as President Ibrahim Traoré made an unannounced journey to a neighborhood food stall. No media entourage, no formal attire, no elaborate security detail, just a leader seeking genuine connection with his people. The atmosphere was alive with the aromas of steamed rice, golden plantains, and spiced broth. Young voices echoed with laughter nearby. Women tended to large cooking vessels. An elderly musician coaxed melodies from a traditional wooden instrument in the shade. Traoré approached the weathered serving counter with a genuine smile. The vendor, startled yet deeply honored, offered a respectful greeting with a profound bow. "Mr. President, please allow me to prepare our finest offering." A steaming portion appeared, fragrant rice accompanied by rich sauce and perfectly grilled fish. As Traoré extended his hand toward the meal, a piercing cry shattered the peaceful scene. "Don't eat that!" The urgent warning came from a small figure, a barefoot child, no more than 10 years old, covered in dust and grime, who had darted forward from the shadows. The entire gathering became motionless. Even Traoré's outstretched hand remained suspended. All eyes fixed upon the trembling boy. His breathing was rapid, his voice quivering. "Please don't consume it," he repeated, more softly this time. The marketplace fell into complete silence. Not a soul stirred. Not a breath was audible. Traoré gazed at the young one and inquired with compassion, "What troubles you?" The child collapsed to his knees and whispered urgently, "It contains poison." The vendor's hands began trembling violently. Shocked murmurs spread through the gathered crowd. Security personnel moved to intervene, but Traoré raised his palm firmly. "Leave the child unharmed," he commanded with quiet authority. He lowered himself to the boy's level, placing a reassuring hand upon his shoulder. "Tell me your name," he requested gently. The child's lips quivered. "Souleymane." "And how are you certain it's poisoned, Souleymane?" The boy glanced fearfully toward the kitchen. "Because I witnessed the stranger. He arrived before dawn," he argued. "With the cook. He added something to that vessel when everyone's attention was elsewhere. I rest near the refuse containers. I heard their conversation. I saw his actions." Eyes turned accusingly toward the cook. The man's complexion had drained of color. "That's false. He's merely a vagrant child." "He's fabricating lies." The cook protested, but his voice betrayed his panic. Traoré rose and addressed his aide. "Have the food analyzed discreetly, immediately." Within moments, a sealed container was removed for testing. The crowd remained perfectly still. Souleymane's legs trembled weakly. He appeared as though he hadn't consumed food in many days. Traoré knelt once more and asked, "When did you last have a meal?" Souleymane hesitated, then averted his gaze and answered, 3 days past." A single tear traced down his cheek. Traoré gently drew the boy into his embrace. Word of the incident spread rapidly throughout the city. By midday, the marketplace buzzed not with alarm but with hushed conversations. The president embraced a homeless child. They claimed the food contained poison. No cameras captured it. He didn't come for publicity. Traoré remained at the humble food stall, seated beside Souleymane on a simple wooden bench. He refused to depart until the test results arrived. That afternoon, a confidential report was delivered. Quietly, the security chief handed it to Traoré. He opened it, read the contents, closed it, then looked up and spoke just 3 words. "The boy's correct." Gasps and shouts erupted as eyes turned to the cook, who had vanished into the rear kitchen. Within seconds, he attempted to escape through the back alleyway, but 2 soldiers calmly blocked his path. No weapons were drawn. No violence occurred, just quiet justice. Souleymane clutched Traoré's sleeve, trembling. "Am I in trouble?" he whispered. Traoré acute regarded him with such warmth that even the most hardened guard wiped away tears. "No, my child, you have just preserved a life." Souleymane blinked, then wept, but not from fear this time. These were the Tears of a child who, after years of being invisible, had finally been acknowledged. And everything was about to transform. After the contaminated meal was removed and the cook arrested, Traoré remained seated, holding Souleymane close. The boy's hands were frigid, his body fragile as parchment. His ribs were visible through his tattered shirt. "Why were you resting?" "Near the kitchen?" Traoré inquired. Souleymane hesitated, then replied in a hushed voice, "Because occasionally they discard leftover food. I wait until they close. I consume what I discover in the refuse." The silence that followed was profound. Everyone present heard it. Everyone felt its weight. "I have no relatives," he continued. "My mother passed away. My father traveled to Ghana and never returned. I sleep wherever possible." The boy's voice cracked, but he didn't weep this time. Traoré gently removed his jacket and wrapped it around the child. Then he turned to his security team. "He remains at my side." "But sir, this location isn't secure." "I said he remains at my side." People in the marketplace began applauding. Some covered their faces, tears streaming down their cheeks. No one had expected the president to stay. No one had expected him to care so deeply. But he did. And in that small street kitchen, something greater than politics had just begun. Souleymane's tiny legs could barely maintain the pace. So Traoré carried him through the crowd, through the whispers, past the waiting vehicles. He placed the boy gently into his official car-soft leather seats. Cool air conditioning, and for the first time in perhaps years, Souleymane didn't feel the oppressive heat of the streets. The boy looked around nervously. "Am I being taken?" "To prison?" Traoré smiled softly. "No, son, you're going to be protected." They traveled in silence, but Souleymane's stomach rumbled loudly. Embarrassed, he looked down. Traoré opened a bag beside him, fresh bread, a ripe banana, a bottle of cold water. He handed it to Souleymane without speaking. The boy's hands shook as he accepted it. Tears filled his eyes, but he held them back. "I didn't intend to create problems," he whispered. "You preserved my life," Traoré said. "That's not a problem, that's bravery." At the presidential residence, a modest room was quickly prepared, a bed made with fresh linens, new clothing laid out. It was simple but welcoming. Souleymane stood at the threshold, afraid to enter. Traoré knelt beside him and asked, "When did you last sleep in a bed?" The boy looked up and answered, "I cannot remember." And then, for the first time, he smiled. That night, Traoré sat quietly beside Souleymane's bedside. The boy had fallen asleep, clutching the soft blanket tightly. But something in Traoré's expression revealed he wasn't at peace. He remembered something, a time long ago. He too had once been a boy who faced hunger. He too had once gone to bed with an empty stomach. He didn't share it often, but now it returned to him the next morning. As the sun illuminated the city of Ouagadougou, an elderly woman arrived at the presidential gates. Her clothing was modest, her eyes weary. But she carried something, a plastic bag filled with old photographs and a hand-stitched shirt. "I saw him on the news," she said. "The little boy." "That's my grandson." Guards were uncertain until she showed the photographs. One depicted Souleymane, perhaps age 5, standing beside her with a missing tooth and a crooked grin. "I lost him when my daughter died. We became separated during the unrest 3 years ago," she whispered. "I've searched everywhere." Inside the house, Souleymane had just awakened. When he saw the woman's face on the screen, he gasped, "Grandmother!" Outside, the guards were already wiping tears from their eyes. Souleymane stood frozen in the hallway. He stared at the screen showing the old woman at the gate. His lips trembled. That's my grandmother." Traoré turned to him gently. "Are you certain?" Souleymane nodded slowly, then faster. "She used to sing to me at night. She called me her lion." Without hesitation, Traoré gave the order to bring the woman inside. When she entered the room, she gasped and dropped her bag. "Souleymane!" The boy ran to her, his tiny feet echoing across the floor. They held each other and wept so deeply that even the guards turned away out of respect. "I thought I had lost you forever," she whispered. Traoré stood at the door, watching silently. For him, this reunion was worth more than any speech or medal. Later, That evening, he sat alone in his office, holding a photograph the woman had given him Souleymane as a baby in her arms. Then a thought came to him. If this boy had been left to wander the streets, how many more like him were out there? And just like that, an idea began to grow, an idea that could change everything. That night, President Traoré made a quiet phone call. He didn't summon ministers or generals. He called a small group of social workers, teachers, and community volunteers, the kind of people who work in silence, saving lives with no cameras watching. By midnight, they were seated around him at the palace. He spoke simply. I met a boy today who saved my life. His name is Souleymane. He sleeps in the streets, eats from garbage, but he is brave. They listened, stunned. I want every child like him off the streets. Not next year, not next month, this week. A woman raised her hand timidly. Sir, there are thousands, maybe more. Then we start with 10, Traoré replied. That night he stood up and added, if we wait for perfection, nothing will change. But if we start with love, we can save lives. He reached into his drawer and handed over a personal check. Use this to feed them, clothe them, embrace them. We'll find more money later. Right now, we need to find more Souleymanes. And just like that, a mission began. Not from behind a desk, but from the heart of a man who hadn't forgotten where he came from. Before sunrise, teams quietly spread through the city of Ouagadougou. No sirens, no cameras, just vans, volunteers, warm blankets, and kind voices. One team found 3 children huddled behind a market stall, using torn sacks to stay warm. Another found a girl no older than 7, fast asleep near a drainage pipe, holding an empty plastic cup. When they asked her name, she whispered, Kadi. By noon, 10 children had been brought into the care center that had been cleaned and reopened overnight. Souleymane was waiting with a smile and fresh clothes. He had a new job to welcome each child with a hug and say, you're safe now. Traoré visited again that afternoon, this time without guards. He sat on the floor with the children, listened, shared food, and told them stories about hope and courage. But while they laughed and smiled, a quiet question stirred inside him. What if the plate that was poisoned wasn't meant for him, but for anyone who couldn't speak up? As his eyes scanned the little faces in the room, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about saving one child. This was about giving every child a voice. And he was ready to fight for that voice. Late that night, Souleymane couldn't sleep. He sat alone, hugging his knees under the blanket someone had given him earlier. His mind kept replaying the scene. At the kitchen, the poisoned plate, the man who nearly ate it, President Traoré. A voice broke the silence. It was Traoré himself, holding 2 cups of warm tea. Couldn't sleep? He asked gently. Souleymane shook his head. The president sat beside him on the mattress. Why did you shout that day? How did you know something was wrong with the food? The boy stared at the cup in his hands. I saw the man in the black jacket pour something into it. He didn't know I was hiding behind the trash bin, he whispered. Traoré froze. Did you see his face? Souleymane nodded. I've seen him before with the kitchen owner. Silence fell. Traoré didn't say a word. He simply placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder. Thank you for saving my life, he said. But inside, a storm had begun to brew. If someone tried to poison the food at a public kitchen, what else were they capable of? The truth needed to come out fast. The next morning, Traoré returned to the same kitchen, but this time he wasn't alone. Hidden security agents moved through the nearby streets, watching everything. The kitchen appeared normal, too normal. The same cook greeted him with a forced smile. Welcome again, Mr. President, an honor as always. But Traoré didn't sit down. I'd like to see your kitchen, he said calmly. The cook froze. I'm not sure it's tidy enough. We won't mind. He stepped inside. The small dim kitchen smelled of oil and charcoal. Pots clanged. A teenager scrubbed dishes nervously. Traoré glanced around and saw something odd, a small cabinet locked with a shiny new padlock. What's in there? He asked. Oh, just old utensils. Traoré turned to his aide. Break it open. The room stiffened. The cook's eyes widened. Before the aide could move, the cook shouted, Wait! He rushed forward but slipped, knocking over a pan and exposing a hidden compartment beneath the stove. Inside, 3 vials, one half empty. The label reads cyanide, extremely toxic. Traoré's jaw clenched. A slow, heavy silence fell over the room. Souleymane hadn't been imagining anything. Someone had tried to kill the president, and it was no random act. Back at the palace, the lab confirmed it. The substance found in the kitchen wasn't just dangerous, it was deadly enough to kill multiple people silently. As Traoré stared at the report in his hand, his heart felt heavy. Not from fear, but from betrayal. Who would target a street kitchen? Used by the poor? His advisor entered the room. We traced the kitchen's ownership. It's registered to a man named Karim Sanogo. Traoré raised an eyebrow. That name sounds familiar. The advisor nodded. He's a businessman. Runs several food contracts across Ouagadougou and beyond. He donated to a few political groups that opposed your reforms. It clicked. This wasn't about the president alone. It was about silencing progress, crippling hope, sending a message to the people who believed change was possible. I want him. Found, Traoré said firmly, and I want it done quietly. The advisor hesitated. Sir, if this gets out, it could cause panic. Traoré looked out the window at the children playing in the shelter yard, Souleymane among them. That's why we won't speak loudly, he replied. We'll speak through justice. But behind his calm voice, a storm of determination was rising. And someone out there was about to face the consequence of underestimating a child. That same night, Traoré's team moved in silence. A convoy of unmarked cars stopped near a fancy villa on the outskirts of Ouagadougou. It belonged to Karim Sanogo, the man behind the poisoned food. He was asleep when the agents entered. They found documents, kitchen records, phone logs, and worse photographs of Traoré marked Target. A map showed street kitchens across the city. Some were circled in red. One was labeled Test Location, Final Week. The betrayal ran deep. Karim was dragged from his bed, disheveled and shouting, "You have no proof! This is politics!" But he froze when he saw who was waiting outside. President Traoré, calm, silent, eyes full of controlled fire. You risked innocent lives, Traoré said coldly. For power, Karim spat. You're turning the poor against the rich. You're the danger here. Traoré stepped closer. No, I'm giving the poor something you never gave them. Hope. Karim was handcuffed and taken away, but the storm was far from over. Souleymane's act had revealed a network of cruelty. Now Traoré had a bigger mission to protect every forgotten child who ate from the streets. The nation was about to witness something powerful. The following morning, Ibrahim Traoré made a decision that shocked his staff. I want to eat with the street children today, he said. No speeches, no cameras, just a shared meal. They hesitated. After what happened? Yes, he nodded, exactly because of what happened. A few hours later, in a clean open yard behind a shelter, plastic tables were arranged. Dozens of homeless children stared in disbelief as the president of their country sat among them. But what stunned them most was this. He sat next to Souleymane. And when the food arrived, Traoré didn't touch his plate first. He looked at the boy and said, Will you eat with me? Souleymane smiled shyly, nodding. Together they took the first bite. Tears welled up in the eyes of shelter workers. One whispered, We've never seen anything like this. Later, a little girl tugged Traoré's shirt and asked, Are you really the president? He smiled and replied, Yes, but today I'm your friend. That day, no one saw a powerful leader. They saw a man sitting with the forgotten, eating from the same plate, treating them like family. And it was more powerful than any speech. After the meal, Souleymane and Traoré sat under a tree. The boy stared at the sky, silent for a moment, then whispered, Nobody ever cared to ask my full name. Traoré looked at him gently. Tell me. Souleymane Ouedraogo. My mother used to call me her little sunrise. She died when I was 6. The words hit Traoré in the chest like a stone. He listened quietly, letting the boy speak. My father disappeared. I lived on the streets, sometimes eating from garbage. People looked through me like I didn't exist. A pause. Then Souleymane turned to him. But when you looked at me, you saw me. Traoré placed his hand on the boy's. I see someone strong, someone brave, someone who saved my life. Souleymane's lips trembled. For the first time, someone spoke his name with love, not pity. I want to go to school one day, he said softly. I want to be someone who helps. Traoré nodded slowly. You will, and not just school. You'll live, you'll grow, you'll rise. And in that quiet moment, a bond formed deeper than politics, deeper than titles. It was one between a forgotten child and a leader who refused to forget. Later that evening, President Traoré called an emergency press conference. No grand stage, no red carpet, just a small room with wooden chairs and journalists seated shoulder to shoulder. At the front stood Souleymane, cleaned up, wearing a new shirt, and beside him, Traoré. He began softly, This week I nearly ate poisoned food. But what hurts me more is what I discovered behind that moment. He pointed gently to Souleymane. This boy didn't just save my life. He reminded me that we still have many children sleeping on the streets, begging to survive, treated like shadows. Traoré looked around the room, voice thick with emotion. That ends now. He announced the creation of a new national shelter and education program starting immediately. For every child like Souleymane, there will be a place, a bed, a school, and someone who believes in them. Gasps, applause. Some reporters wiped their eyes. Souleymane smiled shyly, then whispered, Merci, Monsieur le Président. Traoré knelt beside him and replied, Merci to you, my son. And just like that, one act of courage had rewritten the fate of many. The entire country was watching and feeling every word. The news spread like wildfire across Burkina Faso. Radios buzzed, phones rang, and TV screens lit up with images of Souleymane and Traoré sitting side by side. Markets paused, streets quieted, people cried. In villages, elders gathered children and said, This is the kind of leader we prayed for. In schools, kids drew pictures of a boy and a president holding hands. Even